When Napoleon Bonaparte ruled in France, the emperor ordered to find all the people who resembled him. They were found. There were 4 of them. However, one of them was killed before the defeat at Waterloo, and the second suffered a great misfortune, because of which he could no longer serve the emperor. But there were still 2 doppelgangers who served during the Napoleonic era. It is with one of them, François Eugène Robo, and is associated with our unusually interesting narrative. As you know, Napoleon's defeat led to the British decision to imprison him on the island of Helena, from where it was impossible to escape. At this point, after the end of the war, François Robo returned home to his small homeland in Ballycourt, France, with the rank of corporal. It should be mentioned that François quickly got into the retinue of the emperor, and always accompanied him in all campaigns. This fact gives full reason to think that Eugène Robo played not the last role in the life of Napoleon. But about this we will talk a little further. The first 7 weeks on the island, Napoleon lived in a small house, where he did not even have a separate room. He shared it with his generals. Later, the prisoner moved into a well-appointed mansion, where there were 11 rooms, 2 of which were the personal apartments of the former French emperor. The house had a billiard room, a dining room, a library. The comfort provided was not due to any special magnanimity towards the former enemy. So it was more convenient for the British to organize round-the-clock security, because the mansion was located in a fortunate, viewed from all sides. The territory of the house included a small park, where Napoleon was allowed to walk. He was forbidden to leave the perimeter, and in this sense, the famous painting by Ayvazovsky, where Napoleon stands on the rocky shore of the island and looks at the ocean, is a fantasy of the artist. Both the first small house and the second spacious one, where Napoleon lived, were given to France by England after the death of the prisoner. These small plots of land officially became French territory on an English island. In Napoleon's time, to get from Cape Town to Helena, you had to travel by ship for almost a week. Until the last few years, the sea route was the only way to visit the place where the famous prisoner lived out the rest of his life. However, in 2015, an airport was built here, and ships no longer travel to the island. Now the only way is by air, with planes flying twice a week. There are at least 3 legends that say that Napoleon escaped from Helena and ended his days in Europe. One of the legends says that on August 7, 1815, when the ship taking Napoleon to the place of exile was to cross the equator, in one of the villages of the French Alps appeared a very strange man. The villagers who had seen Napoleon in his glory years recognized him as their emperor, but he introduced himself as Felix. The royal gendarmes immediately rushed in his footsteps, arrested him, and placed him in the prison of Vienne and Dauphinet. At this point, the traces of Napoleon Felix are lost, as no documents related to the arrest were found. Another legend is based on the testimony given in 1822 by Armand Marquisat, secretary of the prefecture of the city of Mende. He said that he had learned of the residence of a certain priest, whose name was Father Galerian, in the vicinity of the city. The people of the surrounding villages for some reason worshipped this priest and pronounced his name with the greatest fear. Intrigued, Marquisat began to make inquiries and soon learned that the mysterious priest appeared unknown, where he came from, and bought a dilapidated castle near the city. The villagers whispered that the priest was their former emperor. The Marquisat, accompanied by the prefect and the captain of the gendarmerie, went to see or disbelieve this in person. Father Galerian met them on the road at the head of a mounted escort of men in monks' robes like his. They were all surprisingly good in the saddle. But even more, Marquisat was amazed at the striking resemblance between Father Galerian and Napoleon. The third legend said that on May 5, 1821, on the island of Helena died not Napoleon, and Corporal Napoleon's army Robo, surprisingly similar to Napoleon. The emperor himself allegedly spent the rest of his life in Italy. Let's look at the third assumption in more detail. It all began with the sudden disappearance of François in Ballycourt in 1818. According to witnesses, an expensive carriage pulled up to the house. It is not known who was in it. There is an assumption that there was General Gergar, who always supported Napoleon, even being in the post of chief commandant of Helena. After that, Robo even managed to tell the neighbors that in the carriage was only a hair buyer. Then, François went missing. The state began to search for the double. Eventually, law enforcement paid a visit to his sister, who lived luxuriously in Turin. When asked where her brother had gone, her sister said that he had gone somewhere far away. But where? She does not know. Shortly after the disappearance of François Eugène, a certain Rivard and his business partner Petrucci stay in Verona, Italy. They open a store. But because of his impossible resemblance to the great Napoleon, everyone starts calling Revered the Emperor. While in Verona appears a stranger monstrously similar to the famous conqueror, in the Mediterranean real Bonaparte suddenly becomes too forgetful. His handwriting changes dramatically. He loses his former mannerisms. French elites believe this phenomenon to be the result of his long imprisonment on the island. 2 years later, the owner of a store in an Italian town hastily leaves his business and goes somewhere else. And 12 days later, 4.09/1823 stranger found murdered on the way to the imperial estate, where the son of Bonaparte himself suffered from scarlet fever. After examining the body, the site was cordoned off by law enforcement, and the conqueror's wife insisted that the rascal be buried on the estate. The man's final resting place was in direct proximity to the forthcoming burials of his wife and son. Who was this stranger? A double or the real Napoleon? It is clear that all these beautiful legends do not and cannot be any official confirmation. There are only indirect facts, which we will try to analyze. If there was none of this, and in 1821 on the island of Streak Helena died a real Napoleon Bonaparte, then how can we explain the fact that in 1817 to 1818 years, the island under various pretexts left many of the closest persons from the entourage of the emperor? Secretary Emmanuel de las Casas, General Gaspar Gergo, then at once 6 servants, as well as servants of Napoleon's closest. It is known that by the middle of 1819 on the island remained only half of the French who had previously lived there. In addition, some biographers of Napoleon quotes a letter from the wife of General Henry Gratian Bertrand, who was one of the emperor's associates and together with his wife accompanied him in exile. The letter is dated August 25, 1818, and contains the strange phrase, "Victory, victory. Napoleon has left the island," and that's it. No commentary, no explanation. The person to whom the letter was addressed apparently needed no explanation. And shortly before this strange letter was written, a fast American sailing ship appeared near the island and began to raid, which caused great alarm to the British. It was not only that the very behavior of the sailing ship aroused their suspicion, but also that in case of any complications, none of the former nearby British ships would be able to keep up with the American. It is likely that on this ship to the island arrived a double Robo, and left Napoleon himself. But the double, such was his purpose, had to die. This was important both for the Napoleonic legend itself and to save the participants of the escape from persecution. It may seem surprising, but Napoleon's great-uncle Cardinal Joseph Fesch and the emperor's mother Laetitia in 1818 to 1819 were really sure that the prisoner of Streak Helena managed to escape. It was for this reason that they rejected the possibility of sending first-class physicians to Napoleon, which involved considerable expense, and sent instead only the young Dr. Francesco Antomarchi. Madame Laetitia, who spared nothing for her children, certainly did not want to spend money on the treatment of some double who had substituted for her great son.